There are days when the Chargers news cycle feels like a leaked war room script, and today is exactly one of those days. We've got behind-the-scenes buzz about what Joe Hortiz might be cooking up in the draft, heavy speculation tying a massive name to this defense, a very uncomfortable Quentin Johnston conversation, and a mock draft move that could shift this franchise's future in a big way. And the most important thing right now is separating what's real, what's projection, and what actually makes sense for where this team is headed. Stick with me, because what's floating around Los Angeles right now hits 2026 directly and could shape what this fan base is celebrating tomorrow. The first story cracks open that little backstage window that changes how you look at the draft. The name on the table, as a possibility for round 2, is Oklahoma edge rusher R. Mason Thomas. And the key detail here isn't just the raw talent, it's the kind of debate he would spark inside the Chargers building. On one side, Justin Mello projects Thomas as a really intriguing fit if the team doesn't grab a pass rusher in round 1. And the logic is easy to follow. Explosive first step, non-stop motor, real production with 15.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons, and that specialist pressure profile that can come in and speed the whole game up. This roster needs that exact change of pace. Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipolotu bring power, bulk, and physicality. What feels missing, if we're being honest, is that one guy who comes flying off the edge like a lit match thrown into a dark room. But draft room buzz is never just hype, and that's where this gets serious. Thomas Martinez brought up a point that lines up directly with Joe Hortiz's history: arm length. That might sound like a minor detail to people on the outside, but to teams building a defense, it absolutely is not. The Chargers value edge defenders who can hold firm against the run, and that measurement has consistently shown up as an important part of the profile. R. Mason Thomas has shorter arms than what many people connect with the kind of edge this franchise usually targets. So the question stops being, is he talented? Because almost nobody argues that. The real question is this: does the staff believe his burst and aggression are enough to outweigh a physical trait that usually works against him in this system? That's what makes this story so interesting. It doesn't hand us a clean answer, but it says a lot about where this team is right now. If the Chargers see Thomas as a rotational piece with legit upside to become Mac's eventual successor, it makes sense. If they stay completely faithful to the physical template they've leaned on before, maybe he never becomes a serious target at all. And honestly, this kind of split between analysts is exactly the kind of smoke that usually shows up before a surprise pick on draft night. Then the whole room got louder the second the report dropped that Dexter Lawrence requested a trade from the Giants and won't be taking part in the team's off-season workout program. That part is reported fact. What comes next moves into projection, but it's the kind of projection that makes way too much sense to ignore. The Chargers immediately popped up as one of the teams being connected to the possibility. And it's not hard to see why. Los Angeles preserved cap space, stayed flexible, and right now has the structure to absorb a major contract without blowing up the rest of the roster. When a defender of Lawrence's caliber hits the radar, the whole league pays attention. But the Chargers wouldn't just be window shopping here. They'd be a believable contender. And there's another backstage wrinkle that makes this even juicier. The regime change in New York, with John Harbaugh taking over the Giants, looked like it might create a fresh opening to fix Lawrence's contract situation. Instead, this trade request says the exact opposite. The drama didn't cool off, it got hotter. And when the relationship between a star player and a franchise reaches that point, rival teams start sketching out scenarios before a real negotiation even begins. Ted Nguyen was one of the media voices openly pushing the idea that the Chargers should be in on Lawrence. But dreaming on the fit is the easy part. The hard part is calculating the actual cost of a move like this. Because if we're talking pure football need, the fit is almost scary. Chris O'Leary is stepping in after Jesse Minter's departure, and as much as there may be confidence in the internal pipeline, nobody can pretend swapping out an established coordinator for someone still early in his NFL climb is a neutral move. Dropping Dexter Lawrence into the middle of that defense would be handing the new coordinator a competitive shortcut right away. This wouldn't just be about plugging a hole. It would be about raising the ceiling of the entire unit. The problem is, a move like that charges you twice. Once in the draft capital you'd have to send to New York, and again in the new deal Lawrence would probably want, because his market no longer matches the current value of his contract. So here's the most honest read on it. Chargers plus Dexter Lawrence is a powerful storyline, and it absolutely works on paper, but right now it is still speculation. The hard fact is the trade request. Everything else depends on how much Joe Hortiz would be willing to sacrifice in a draft where this team isn't exactly swimming in picks. And if the Chargers really do jump into that race, this won't be some minor tweak. It would be a full-blown statement of intent. Some stories don't explode because of what happened. They explode because of what they reveal. That Quentin Johnston scenario is exactly that. And let's make this crystal clear right from the jump. There is no report saying the Chargers are shopping him. What does exist is a Bill Barnwell ESPN mock draft exercise where Los Angeles moves up from number 22 to number 19, includes Quentin Johnston in the package, and still gets back a 5th-round pick. It's a simulation, a projection, not a confirmed front office leak, but it's the kind of projection that forces us to stare directly at one of the most uncomfortable questions inside this franchise. Because Johnston might be the trickiest problem on this offense right now. Not because he's been a total bust, and that's exactly why this is so messy. If he had completely flamed out, the decision would be easy, but that's not what happened. He's flashed. He's had stretches where it looked like he might finally become the dominant receiver people imagined when he was taken in the 1st round in 2023. And then, just like that, he vanished for long chunks of the season. That roller coaster is what makes the whole thing so complicated. Trade him now, and you might be selling low. Keep him, and you could be pushing a major long-term question down the road for another year. In Barnwell's mock, the logic is that the Chargers move up to secure the best guard in the draft, Olivega-Ioane, and still add a day 3 pick on top of it. On paper, that looks like the kind of move that protects Justin Herbert right now and stabilizes the future of the offensive line. But front offices don't operate on spreadsheet logic alone. They work off internal conviction, player development projections, and market read. If Joe Hortiz believes Quentin still has another level to unlock, it's very hard to see him moving the receiver now for a return that might feel, inside the building, like cashing out below the original vision. That's why this story hits so hard. Not because the trade itself feels imminent, because right now it doesn't. It hits because it drags the real dilemma into the light. Do the Chargers still see Quentin Johnston as part of the future? Or do they see him as an asset that never reached the value they hoped for? And I need to hear from the Bolt fam on this one. Are you riding with Quentin in 2026? Or would you move him to climb the board? This 4th story feels like classic draft night smoke with a very real backstage heartbeat. The idea from Tyler Dragon at USA Today looks simple on the surface. The Chargers move down from number 22 to number 24 in a trade with the Browns and still land Clemson edge rusher TJ Parker. On paper, it feels like one of those tiny little adjustments that barely registers when it happens. But that is exactly the type of move that fits Joe Hortiz like a glove. And anybody who's followed this front office closely knows that when there's a chance to squeeze extra value out of the board without losing the main target, they're usually not the type to sit still and hope the room falls their way. The heart of this isn't just TJ Parker as a prospect, it's the full shape of the move. The Chargers go into this draft with only 5 picks, so any chance to add ammunition without losing access to a player they truly love becomes a huge deal. And that range of the board, right around pick 22, is usually where quarterback-needy teams and desperate front offices start burning up the phones. That's where the pressure climbs. That's where a cold-blooded GM can turn a 2-spot drop into another piece on the chessboard. To people on the outside, that might look conservative. To people who understand roster construction, it can be the move that quietly holds an entire draft class together. Now let's talk about the player, because TJ Parker wouldn't be some fallback prize here. The read in this mock is that he would fill a very real need in the Chargers' edge rotation, especially with an eye on life after Khalil Mack and the hole left by Odafe Owe's departure. Parker brings strength, physicality, and real run defense value. And that alone lines up with the identity this team is trying to build. And there's more. This wouldn't be a situation where he has to carry the whole unit from the opening snap. He'd walk into an environment where he could learn, sharpen his technique, and grow into a more natural succession plan next to Tuli Tui Polotu. That's why this mock matters. Not because it's flashy, but because it feels believable. It feels like the kind of decision that gets built quietly behind the curtain while everybody else is busy hunting for some blockbuster trade. Sometimes the biggest front office win isn't moving up 10 spots or making national headlines. Sometimes it's sliding back 2 picks, grabbing more capital, and still walking away with the guy who was sitting near the top of your board the whole time. If that's the route the Chargers take, this fan base better be ready, because that kind of small move can hit like a thunderclap later. When you step back and look at the whole picture, what these stories really show is a crystal clear snapshot of the Chargers front office temperature right now. There's room for aggression, there's a ton of calculation, and there's very real tension between going all in on the present and protecting the future. R. Mason Thomas is dividing evaluators. Dexter Lawrence is an expensive possibility and still just that. Quentin Johnston remains an internal dilemma, and the odds of Joe Hortiz moving down the board to stack more value feel more believable by the day. The chessboard is set, and the next move could reshape the face of this team. If you want, I can also turn this into a fully polished, ready-to-record American YouTube script in one clean flow.